a lifelong New Yorker or just a happy tourist like me, you probably know the basics, like that's the plaza, that's Fifth Avenue, but do you know what that statue is right there? You've probably walked by it thousands of times and never even known. Shame on you. Today, we're gonna teach you a lesson. But we promise this lesson will be a fun one. You know how when you're a kid and all you ask is why? Well, I never quite outgrew that whole quest for knowledge phase. In fact, I've made a career out of asking who, what, where, why, and how as an arts and travel reporter for the past 20 years. So, if I have an insatiable curiosity about the exciting, inspiring, beautiful world of art, architecture, and hidden history all around us, I bet you do too. This isn't your typical what to do on a vacation travel show. Oh no. This is your all-access pass to a deeper understanding of the world's great art and architecture, people and places, history, and how did they do that. So, come along on our educational journey, our field trip for grown-ups who have never quite grown up, and learn with the Curious Traveler. The Big Apple, the mega metropolis, Gotham City, NYC. Nicknames are nothing new to New York City. So, here's your New York nickname history lesson, all delivered in a New York minute. New York's original inhabitants, the Lenape, called their island Mannahatta, which means hilly island. In 1524, European explorers named it New Angoulême after the French king. Then in 1609, British explorer Henry Hudson sailed on through, named a river after himself, but didn't change the island's name. And then in 1624, the Dutch dubbed it New Amsterdam as the capital of the New Netherlands, the 7 colonies of the mid-Atlantic U.S. In 1664, though, the British took over, named it New York after the Duke of York. In 1673, the Dutch briefly took the island back, named it New Orange after the Prince of Orange, which is now a province in France. But in 1674, the British said, give it back. They made it New York again, and it has been thus ever since. Phew! And that was just the beginning. Over the following centuries, waves of immigrants from all over the world came to New York, seeking a better life and the perfect pizza. Wait, that's just me. New York has so many architectural icons, but we only have a half hour, so today we're taking you to 3 of the most quintessential New York City landmarks that, in one way or another, mark the birth and growth of America's greatest city. We'll worship at the Temple of Transportation and the Temple of the Arts, and then we'll find true inspiration at Hughes Folly. Got your thinking caps and sensible walking shoes on? Let's get curious. Here's what I'm curious about at Grand Central. How did turn-of-the-century designers use this newfangled thing called electricity? Why bother to make a train station look like a palace? Are those constellations up there backwards? Why is there a patch of dirt on the ceiling? Why do I keep seeing acorns everywhere? Why are there plain old light bulbs on the chandeliers? Couldn't they afford something better? How did that woman just disappear inside the information booth? And finally, how did the clock cleaners get all the way up here to clean? Grand Central Terminal was completed in 1913 at a cost of $80 million, and at the time was hailed as the largest and greatest railway terminal in the world. Grand Central covers nearly 70 acres with a massive 2-story train yard with 123 tracks, all underground, specifically so it wouldn't disturb that prime Manhattan real estate above. In 1908, all steam-powered trains had to switch to electric, and Grand Central was one of the world's first all-electric buildings and took all this new technology underground. When this was first conceived, it was really revolutionary, talking about having traffic going underground so that when you're walking above it, you don't even realize what's happening underneath.
With 700 trains coming and going every day, you don't see any trains. Right. Even on all the streets and areas, no trains to be seen.
But Grand Central isn't only a triumph of civil engineering, it had to be a triumph in Beaux-Arts architecture as well. In 1869, a wise group of people said, you know what, travel is grueling enough. When you arrive at your destination, you should enter the city through a palace, not a shed. And I'd say today, more than 100 years later, here at Grand Central Terminal, mission accomplished. The architectural firms of Reed and Stem and Warren and Wetmore created a main concourse at the center of their terminal. The space is both cavernous and majestic, at 275 feet long, 120 feet wide, and 125 feet high. It's truly palatial.
The Vanderbilts, the wealthiest family in the United States, and they were the owners of the greatest railroad in this nation. And for this to be the central hub, the home point of it, in order to shout it out, to be the symbol, they made this place palatial. They made it to a temple of transportation.
And this temple was built between 1903 and 1913, when the original building was torn down and replaced in that breathtaking Beaux-Arts style. Modeled after the ancient Roman baths and, like many of New York's grand landmarks, the architecture of Paris. Was this based on the Paris Opera House?
Yes, as a matter of fact, the staircases on either side are modeled after those of the Paris Opera House. And even those have a little secret, because the one on the east side is actually 1 inch smaller than the one on the west side. The west side is one that's original. The other one here was put in fairly recently, even though it was planned. People coming through here are aghast, especially from other countries and other parts of this nation. Because where have you ever seen a building that so celebrated transportation? No airports look like this. No other train stations or terminals look like this.
And to make it feel even more heavenly, as you enter the main concourse, look 125 feet up and you will see a gorgeous mural covering a staggering 35,000 square feet. It is of the night sky by artist Paul Hellieu and shows all the zodiac signs and stars in all their splendor. The only problem is he got it all backwards. Oops.
The truth is, a muralist was looking down this chart and then up at the ceiling, and he got a mirror image. The Vanderbilts, when they heard about this, came down here, and this ceiling is lit with stars to rip it all out. They came up with a much simpler explanation. They said, oh yes, we know, which they didn't. They said they did it on purpose, which they didn't.
And so the story goes that the Vanderbilts and the artist Paul César Hellieu claimed the view was meant to be from God's vantage point looking downwards. Looks beautiful either way, right?
It looks great no matter what. How many people would look good even if they were all wrong?
Exactly, yeah. Exactly. And the famous ceiling has another, more recent secret. If you look carefully, you will see a small patch of dark on the carefully restored blue. It was left as a reminder of all the smoke and damage done before restoration. And there's many other interesting details, like the old ticket booths still standing, Vanderbilt Hall, Vanderbilt Avenue, and the Campbell Apartment, which is New York City's largest ground floor apartment, now a restaurant and bar. As you're probably catching on, since Cornelius Vanderbilt basically wrote a check for the entire terminal, I mean, who does that? He thought that he'd put his personal stamp on the place. So here is our why is that there moment. Vanderbilt acorns are hidden like Easter eggs around here. The story goes that since the Vanderbilts were self-made millionaires, they had no family crest. So they chose the acorn as their family crest, stating, "From little acorns, mighty oak trees grow." Another beautiful and exquisite detail inside the terminal are these chandeliers behind me. Back in 1913, when they were first put up, they were dipped in 24-karat gold. Typical Vanderbilt style, right? But something perhaps even more valuable are those light bulbs. Now, I know today light bulbs were pretty common, but back then, most people did not have electricity in their own homes. And better still, as soon as you stepped outside the terminal, along the streets of New York City, those lampposts were still gas. In fact, the Vanderbilts were so proud of Grand Central's status as one of the world's first all-electric buildings, they had all their chandeliers and lighting fixtures feature bare light bulbs, 4,000 of them in total. These plain old light bulbs are yet another icon of Grand Central. You'll also see Grand Central's iconic American flag hanging proudly since 9/11. And yet another Grand Central icon, that four-faced opal clock in the center. It's also full of secrets. Rumor has it that the four clock faces were made of opal, with an estimated value between 10 and 20 million. Actually, they're just made of opalescent glass, but hey, they're still pretty. Another secret lurks inside, under the clock, inside the information booth. There's a secret door that leads to a spiral staircase taking you underground. So many secrets here. Here's another, as we climb along another secret passageway, high above the terminal and in between the walls, through these glass catwalks for the best view. Most people never get to see this. And then we climbed higher still for a view only a rare few ever get to see. Modeled after a Roman triumphal arch, Grand Central's 42nd Street entrance is Jules Félix Coutin's massive work of art. When it was unveiled in 1914, it was considered the largest sculptural group in the world, and today still stands as a mighty symbol of the Great Railroad.
There's Mercury in the center for speed, for industry. On Mercury's right, there's Hercules for strength. And on Mercury's left, there's Minerva, the goddess of intellectualism, of thought, of contemplation. It takes all of this to make a mighty railroad, and it sure did.
And at the foot of Mercury, in the center of this mighty statement, is the world's largest Tiffany glass clock. At 13 feet in diameter, it has marked time for a century. And true to Grand Central style, there's yet another little secret hidden here. The 6 is actually a tiny window.
All right, here's the number 6 secret window I was telling you about, and what of you? Hello, New York!
What is it about Grand Central Terminal that is quintessentially New York?
There are many elements about Grand Central Terminal which makes it the symbol of New York and the center of New York. It's the world's largest, it's the world's busiest, it's really the center of commerce, it's a symbol of people rushing, getting someplace. But even more than that, it's a symbol of something that's even great in beauty, in design. New Yorkers come through every day and feel for themselves a sense of rebirth, of renaissance, knowing that you too can be as re-engineered, as renewed and reclaimed as Grand Central. It's a great way to start the day. It's a great way to end the day, every single day.
Here's what I'm curious about at the Met. Why did the Great Hall need to be so great? Why does it feel downright heavenly in here? Why does it look like big walls are swallowing up little walls? And why is this little lady center stage? An American institution, the Metropolitan Museum of Art actually began in Paris in 1866. In fact, many great American ideas came out of Paris during this time, as the wealthy, elite, and prominent thinkers were all inspired by the Louvre and Europe's other grand architecture. Who could blame them? They decided it was high time America had its own national institution and gallery of art to bring art and education to the American people. The Met opened its doors in 1880 and today remains the largest art museum in the U.S. and one of the largest 3 in the world. And no, you can't see it all in one day. But we are checking out a work of art you might miss, although it's right in front of your face, the building itself. We'll explore this grand building, beginning with the Great Hall.
To enter it, you have to climb a series of steps outside. You come up to enter, and you're making a pilgrimage to authenticity and truth, beauty, and art.
It's almost like a temple. Was that?
It's like, exactly, it's a temple of the arts.
So I'm not the only one that walks in and sort of gazes heavenward like this, and you feel something.
You come in and you are meant to be in awe.
The Met's Beaux-Arts Fifth Avenue facade and Great Hall were designed by architect and founding trustee Richard Morris Hunt. Hunt's other works include the Statue of Liberty's pedestal, Carnegie Hall, and the Biltmore Estate in Asheville. Not too shabby, eh? Hunt was also the first American ever to study at the prestigious École des Beaux-Arts in Paris. It all goes back to Paris, doesn't it? But the architectural influences go back farther than that.
It's amazing, and these great domes that are above us. Does the history go as far back as the Pantheon?
A good point.
Yeah.
This is a mix, this building. It's a mix of Roman architecture, of arches and domes, and of classical Greek columns.
And there's an interesting bit of history here. Hunt was not the first architect to design the Met.
He watched with horror as the architects of Central Park, Calvert Vaux and Frederick Law Olmsted, designed a museum in the English Ruskinian Gothic style.
And you can see evidence of Hunt covering up Vaux's displeasing style in the medieval hall today. This was the original building. You can see those Gothic arches being swallowed up by the new Beaux-Arts design. And as ornate as this style is, you'll notice some areas of the Great Hall are quite sparse. There's a reason for that.
If you were to take your eye and look up at one of the corner piers, you'll see a circle with a flat, plain disc. Imagine it like a coin that has not been stamped yet. And it was uncarved because they ran out of money. It's been left unfinished, and we rather love that.
Lack of cash is also the reason the Met is a temple of limestone instead of a temple of marble.
Thank goodness we got Indiana limestone. It holds up much better than marble. And the exterior is virtually untouched after 110 years.
Even the entrance isn't quite finished.
With the great columns, they're great blocks of uncarved stone piled on each other that were intended to be carved as figural groups. Lack of money, now it's modern sculpture. We love it.
But the facade and the Great Hall are, of course, just the entryway to much, much more. May I present to you the entire facade of a Wall Street bank circa 1822. And then over here, of course, we have a bronze statue of Diana that used to be in Madison Square Garden. And of course, over here, we have to have the entire pulpit from a New York church. And last but not least, on the far wall over here, ladies and gentlemen, we have real Tiffany glass from none other than Tiffany's own estate. I mean, why not? Clearly, this is our why is that there moment. Like the medieval hall, the American wing was once a freestanding building facing an open garden. Then, in 1980, it was swallowed up by this ever-growing museum. The centerpiece of the courtyard is this gilded Diana by the famous French-Irish immigrant Augustus Saint Gaudens. This is a rare half-size version of the original Diana. That one sat atop Madison Square Garden, making her the highest point in the city until 1925. She was also the first statue to be lit by electricity in the area. At the end of the courtyard, take the staircase up and, oh wait, are we climbing up a work of art? So this is an amazing staircase that is also a work of art.
It's one of the few works of art at the Metropolitan Museum that we encourage people to walk on.
And it's okay to touch. It's okay to touch.
And to experience. It is one of the public staircases in Louis Sullivan's wonderful skyscraper of 1893, which he built in Chicago.
There's actually pieces of this historic building in several museums and cities all over the country, from elevator doors to archways to wallpaper. Incredible, but remember, as you stroll throughout the rest of the Met, the other 2 million works of art are not to be touched. This exhibit is called Impressionism, Fashion, and Modernity. The collection tells the story of the relationship between art and fashion from the mid-1860s to the mid-1880s as Paris emerged as the style capital of the world. From Monet to Manet to Renoir to Baudelaire, this exhibition is the perfect one to check out because these dresses are exactly the type that the ladies would wear back in 1870 when the Met opened. Feeling a little underdressed. But it doesn't really matter how you or the 6 million other visitors who visit the Met each year are dressed, because it's the exhibits, the galleries, and, as we now know, the building itself that are the true works of art, and what everyone will be looking at. New York City is bursting with inspirational architecture, and no surprise, the houses of worship do it best. Let's visit one of its oldest and most iconic, a true New York landmark. With more than 5 million visitors a year, everyone is welcome to the largest neo-Gothic cathedral in the entire United States, St. Patrick's Cathedral. Here's what I'm curious about at St. Patrick's. Why is there a European cathedral in the middle of America's ode to consumerism? Is that the Pieta? I thought that was in Rome. Why is that pagan god staring at me? Yeah. St. Patrick's Cathedral is as magnificent as it is massive, a National Historic Landmark with twin 330-foot high spires reaching heavenward. It can hold 2,200 people inside, and the outside takes up an entire city block. It's hard to believe, with all the hustle and bustle along Fifth Avenue today, that this area was once so far north of the city it was considered the wilderness. That's why, in the 1850s, when Archbishop John Hughes wanted to build a massive cathedral here, people called it Hughes Folly. This was kind of out in the boondocks, and he said, no, it's going to be in the heart of the city, I can see it.
We're Fifth Avenue.
Right.
So people think like, oh, wow, you've got this amazing spot. Well, it wasn't at the time, and Central Park was basically a marsh.
Construction began in 1858 in the middle of the Civil War. Lack of funds nor lack of manpower would stop the bold artistic dream of architect James Renwick. Did it take its inspirations from the great European cathedral?
So the architect, James Renwick, traveled through Europe sort of to get inspiration for this cathedral.
Renwick based his Gothic Revival design on the cathedral in Cologne, Germany, and his materials are symbolic: brick for strength, marble for beauty, with intricate masonry, crockets, and pinnacles galore. The doors of St. Patrick's Cathedral finally swept open in 1879, sadly 15 years after Archbishop Hugh's death.
He wanted to build what he termed a cathedral of suitable magnificence to sort of, in a sense, mark territory and say that we're Catholics, we're here to stay, we're in the city of New York, and we have this great, thriving Catholic population coming through, largely immigrants and largely Irish immigrants, hence St. Patrick being the patron of Catholics in New York.
And today, visitors are simply awestruck at his vision come to life as we enter and gaze heavenward. You walk in and it is just awe-inspiring. An atmosphere like this, the architecture like this, will do that for somebody.
Well, Renwick designed it so you would feel that way. It's bright and uplifting, and that's what you're supposed to feel. You're supposed to feel this ascension to God and just sort of a response of praise and awe at his beauty and majesty.
There are so many awe-inspiring architectural details here, including the Pieta by William Ordray Partridge. Believe it or not, it's actually bigger than the one in St. Peter's and just as beautiful. Yes, this masterpiece in marble is believed to be 3 times as large as Michelangelo's Pieta in St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. Before Partridge created his Pieta in 1906, he created many other works of art with assistant Lee Laurie at the 1893 World's Columbian Expo in Chicago. There's an interesting connection between these two. We'll show you later. St. Patrick's altars are works of art too. Tiffany & Company designed many of these. Another interesting feature is the Archbishop's chair.
To be a cathedral, cathedra means chair. So to be a cathedral, the church has to have the Archbishop's chair.
And just below the main altar lies St. Patrick's Cathedral's crypt. So a part of the cathedral that maybe most visitors wouldn't see that you're allowing us to see is kind of right behind the altar. What do we have right there?
Right. The Archbishops of New York are buried in St. Patrick's Cathedral.
The crypt is the final resting place for Archbishop Hughes and other bishops. Inspirational history, inspirational architecture, inspirational landmark.
So you have a wonderful, peaceful oasis in the middle of a thriving metropolis.
As we exit the front doors of St. Patrick's, we run right into our "why is that there" moment. Remember assistant Lee Laurie? Right across the street from St. Patrick's Cathedral is the very famous statue of Atlas at Rockefeller Center. Sculptor Lee Laurie put it there, and it's a symbol of the great Art Deco movement. But some say it is also a political statement. They think perhaps it is a statement of secular humanism versus Christianity, and also the fact that some interpret the pose that Atlas is in as a symbol of the cross. Well, political statement or art, you decide. So here's the controversy. It's kind of a philosophical face-off. Some say that Atlas was deliberately placed right here opposite St. Patrick's in 1937 so that it would be perfectly framed within the cathedral's main entrance, and that the statement that Atlas is making is that mankind holds the earth on its shoulders, not God. But the story doesn't end there. Here's a little-known fact. Later on, St. Patrick's placed their own statue to face off against Atlas. As you can see, it's in perfect alignment here at the back of the altar. It's a Christ child figure easily holding up the earth in one hand, making the statement that God holds up the world, not mankind. Pretty clever. Now, walk north on 5th Avenue, and that will bring you full circle back to the Grand Army Plaza where we started our show. So, ready to learn about that statue on the corner of Central Park? Here's what you've been walking by all these years. This grand bronze statue is the Sherman Monument, created in 1897, a tribute to Civil War General Tecumseh Sherman. But why is it here? Well, after the Civil War, Sherman decided to take up residence along Central Park. I mean, what's not to love, right? And apparently Sherman liked to take his horsey out for daily walks. And the sculptor? Well, it's the famous Augustus Saint Gaudens, the same guy who sculpted the Diana we showed you at the Met, which is just a few blocks from here. In 1897, to show the unity of the United States, Saint Gaudens added a female figure leading Sherman. It's similar to the Statue of Liberty, and it represents victory. With a palm branch in her left hand, that symbolizes peace. Then, in 1916, city planners decided to encompass the sculptures into a larger public arts plaza, here in the highly traveled corner between Central Park, the Plaza Hotel, and Fifth Avenue. Nice real estate, eh? It was a split design inspired by Paris's famed Place de la Concorde. It was named the Grand Army Plaza after the Grand Army of the Potomac, another name for the Union Army. So now Sherman has a great view as he permanently gazes directly across to the plaza at the beautiful Pomona atop the grand Pulitzer Fountain of Abundance. And it's fitting that Pomona is the Roman goddess of abundance, as she is permanently checked in at the Plaza Hotel. So, altogether, here in the heart of New York City, we have powerful symbols of unity, victory, peace, and abundance. What could be more American, more New York than that? And you thought it was just a pretty place to hang out and eat a hot dog. So, from the Temple of Transportation in all its grandeur, to the Temple of the Arts for the New World, to the majestic house of worship that was once considered a folly, to a grouping of statues that is so much more than concrete. New York City has so much wonderful hidden history if you just take the time to stop and be curious about it.
So I hope you enjoyed our nerdy tour of New York City. Whether you live here or you're just passing through, I hope now you'll take the time to say, why is that there? Or that there? Or that there? I'm never done. That. Or that.
Thank you.